Welcome back to our channel. That Washington quarter in your pocket might be worth $143,750. A rare 1932 DMS66 and some 1966 no-mint mark errors have sold for $21,000 plus. Think your spare change is worthless? Like and subscribe to uncover more hidden quarter treasures. In 1967, the United States Mint found itself in an era of transition, caught between public demand and dwindling supplies of precious metals. The Coinage Act of 1965 had eliminated silver from quarters and dimes, introducing instead a copper-nickel-clad composition to the nation's coins. This period saw the mint producing hundreds of millions of Washington quarters, attempting to fill the gaps created by widespread hoarding of silver coins in the preceding years. The quarters struck in 1967 carried no mint mark, a deliberate choice meant to discourage collectors from stripping coins from circulation during a nationwide coin shortage. The San Francisco and Denver mints operated without identifiers, their work folded into the same great tide of change that swept through American currency in that turbulent decade. Yet amidst all the uniformity of the copper-nickel quarters, a small handful of coins betrayed a subtle, almost invisible imperfection that would come to light only years later, sparking a quiet ripple through the collecting community. At first glance, the 1967 Washington quarter seemed like every other. The obverse bore the familiar profile of George Washington, his stately features rendered with quiet dignity. On the reverse, the bold eagle stood proud, wings spread, clutching its arrows and olive branches. To a casual observer, it was merely another in the countless coins exchanging hands in grocery stores, vending machines, and gas stations. Yet for one collector sifting through a box of unsearched rolls in his modest basement in the late 1980s, something unusual caught his eye. He had been doing this for years, patiently turning over stacks of clad quarters, scanning for minor variations and die cracks that others dismissed as insignificant. This evening, however, his fingers froze as the edge of one coin flashed under the fluorescent light in a way he'd never seen. He turned it, tilted it, and frowned. The coin seemed heavier somehow, as though it carried more than its fair share of metal. Its reeded edge looked slightly different, thicker, uneven in spots. Bringing it closer to his magnifying glass, the collector examined the surfaces carefully. That's when the faint glint of silver caught his gaze, lurking beneath the outer layers. His heart quickened as he realized that the planchet had been struck improperly. Somehow, impossibly, this 1967 clad quarter appeared to have been struck on a leftover silver planchet, an anomaly that should never have happened in a year when silver had ostensibly disappeared from circulation. In that moment, the ordinary became extraordinary. He felt the weight of history in his palm, a tangible reminder of a mint error born in the chaos of the late 1960s, when machinery and human oversight alike strained under the pressure of mass production. The implications came slowly, like dawn creeping over a horizon. This was no ordinary coin, no simple die crack or doubling. This was something different, something rare, and he could feel the electricity of discovery crackle in the air around him. He couldn't help but wonder who else had handled it before him. How many hands had passed it unknowingly, a secret sleeping in pockets and purses for decades? Had it languished in a jar on a dresser, dropped into jukeboxes used for tolls? Or had it sat in a bank roll all this time, quietly waiting for someone like him to notice? He tucked it into a protective sleeve and, for days afterward, he kept returning to his desk, turning the coin over again and again, each time discovering new subtleties in its surfaces. At first, he thought perhaps he was mistaken. Maybe it was just an odd-toned clad coin, one of those that develop a silvery patina under certain conditions. But a precise weighing confirmed his suspicion. The coin was indeed heavier, consistent with silver rather than copper-nickel. Its distinctive ring, when dropped on a soft surface, gave off the unmistakable high note of silver. It had escaped the mint's rigorous processes, slipping through the cracks at a time when the demand for coins meant corners were occasionally cut. Word of such errors spread slowly at first. Other collectors began to whisper about silver planchets left over from 1964, mixed inadvertently with the new clad stock. Auction houses began to list occasional examples, each sparking bidding wars that drove the price higher than most expected. At first, the coin traded hands for modest sums, a few $100s, then $1,000. The market watched as each sale set a new benchmark, as collectors realized the scarcity of the error. Not every 1967 quarter with an odd luster was genuine, of course. There were fakes and misidentifications to weed out. But the certified pieces became a kind of legend among those who knew where to look. By the mid-1990s, the value of verified silver 1967 quarters had doubled and tripled, commanding ever higher premiums at shows and auctions. At one point, a particularly clean example with crisp strikes and brilliant surfaces brought more than $10,000, sending a quiet shock through the numismatic world. It was as if the coin was slowly revealing its power, coaxing collectors into deeper appreciation of its story. No one could quite predict how high the value might climb. The market fluctuated as silver prices rose and fell, yet the intrinsic allure of this mint mishap continued to pull in serious collectors and investors alike. All the while, the original discoverer of that basement find kept his in a dark, cool safe, contents simply to know what he had. The temptation to sell came and went, but he held firm, sensing that its true worth was not merely monetary. What he didn't anticipate, however, was what came next. Years later, during a routine grading and certification process, a numismatic expert examining his coin noticed something strange. Yes, it was struck on a silver planchet, and yes, it bore all the hallmarks of the famous error. But beneath magnification, the expert spotted something that startled even him. The coin's date, though clearly reading 1967, bore subtle characteristics of an earlier die, a leftover from 1964, the last year before clad coins took over. The die itself had likely been repolished and reused during the production rush, its faint remnants blending into the newer date. It appeared that not only had a silver blank been struck in error, but the die striking it may have been improperly carried over as well. This made the coin possibly unique, a double error, combining a silver planchet and a die reuse that should never have coincided. The revelation reignited interest among collectors, sparking debates and speculation. How many such coins existed? Had others already been lost, spent, melted, or sitting undiscovered in jars and drawers? The question only added to the suspense, pushing the value of confirmed examples even higher. Auction estimates became cautious whispers, and buyers circled like hawks, waiting for the next opportunity to claim a piece of history. The physical characteristics of the error fascinated everyone who encountered it. In hand, the coin felt slightly different, cooler, denser, somehow more substantial than its clad brethren. The edge revealed the telltale sign of silver's brilliance where clad coins showed copper. The fields of the coin glowed with a soft, lustrous sheen, distinct from the duller clad finish. And to those who knew how to listen, the ring of the coin on a hard surface sang a higher, clearer note than any clad quarter ever could. In time, the unexpected twist of the reused die became almost as talked about as the silver planchet itself. Collectors who had once regarded the 1967 error as a curious footnote now began to see it as a window into the mint's frenzied operations during a time of crisis. It became emblematic of the human element in coin production. The hurried decisions, the overlooked details, the occasional lapses that let mistakes slip through and into the hands of the public. The coin's rarity lay not just in its composition but in the story it told about an America in flux, grappling with change even as it tried to project consistency and order. And so the journey of the 1967 silver Washington quarter continued, each discovery adding a new chapter, each sale a new milestone, each whispered lead a new hope for collectors who dreamed of finding one for themselves. Somewhere out there, they believe, a few more wait quietly in change jars, tucked away in forgotten rolls, or resting in the corners of dusty drawers, sleeping relics of a chaotic moment in history, waiting for another pair of careful hands to uncover their secret. The year 1974 found the United States Mint in the midst of another wave of relentless production. Public demand for coins was at an all-time high, fueled by a strong economy and a growing population. The Mint, still relying on the copper-nickel-clad composition introduced in 1965, churned out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters. Each bore the familiar, time-honored design of George Washington on the obverse and the proud eagle on the reverse, a symbol of American stability and strength. Coins from this year were struck in vast numbers at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, but only the Denver and San Francisco pieces carried their respective mint marks. To most people, the 1974 quarter was just another piece of pocket change, indistinguishable from the sea of similar coins. Yet hidden in that year's production were subtle mistakes, small enough to escape notice at first, but dramatic enough to eventually turn an everyday quarter into a numismatic marvel that it started, as it often does, with an unassuming collector working his way through bank rolls one evening. He had spent years combing through circulation coins, chasing small anomalies, filled with equal parts patience and hope. To him, the 1974 quarters were just another date to examine, nothing remarkable. But that particular night, something unusual caught his attention. At first, it was just a faint difference in tone. Something about the color of the coin seemed wrong under his light. It gleamed differently, a faint warmth beneath the cool silver gray that clad coins usually showed. He frowned and leaned in closer, his magnifier revealing odd details that made his pulse quicken. The edge was the first real clue. Instead of the clear copper stripe that should have been visible on a clad coin, this one appeared solid and bright all the way through. No trace of copper peeked out. Curious, he reached for his scale and weighed it carefully. The numbers told him everything he needed to know. The coin was heavier than standard, falling closer to the specifications of a pre-1965 silver quarter. His hands began to tremble slightly as the implications sank in. In 1974, silver planchets should have been long gone, completely phased out nearly a decade earlier. Yet here, somehow, was a quarter struck on a leftover silver blank, a ghost from the past that had slipped unnoticed into the present. He could only imagine how it happened. Perhaps somewhere deep in the mint's storage, a few silver blanks from the early 60s had been misplaced, tucked away on a shelf and forgotten in the chaos. When the presses ran at full speed in 1974 to meet public demand, someone must have fed those few errant planchets into the hopper along with the standard clad blanks. The result was this rare and striking error, a 1974 quarter masquerading as an ordinary coin yet carrying the soul of an earlier era. In the days that followed, he examined the coin obsessively, noting each small detail that distinguished it from its clad cousins. The sound it made when dropped was musical, a bright and clear tone instead of the dull thud of copper-nickel. The weight, the color, the luster, all consistent with silver. His mind raced as he pictured the path this coin must have taken, passed unknowingly through countless transactions, unnoticed by everyone who held it. And now it sat in his hand, its secret finally uncovered after all those years. Word of such finds began to trickle through the collecting community. Others reported similar discoveries, each one adding to the sense of mystery surrounding these errors. Auction houses started listing authenticated 1974 silver quarters, and the bidding wars that followed spoke to the growing awareness of their rarity. At first, prices hovered in the hundreds of dollars, but as more collectors learned of the mistake and the mint confirmed its improbability, the value crept upward. Over the next decade, examples in better condition began commanding thousands, their scarcity driving demand ever higher. For the original collector, the choice of what to do with his find weighed heavily on him. He was approached by buyers, each offer higher than the last, but he hesitated. Something about the coin felt like it belonged to him alone, a reward for years of quiet persistence. Still, he couldn't help but watch as others sold their examples at public auction, each sale setting a new precedent, each one a little higher than the last. The market fluctuated as all markets do, but the trajectory over time was clear. The value of the error kept climbing, fueled by its rarity and the fascination it inspired among serious collectors. But the story did not end there. Years later, another surprise emerged. While submitting his coin to a grading service, an examiner noticed something peculiar, not just that the planchet was silver, but that the die used to strike it showed faint doubling in the date. Subtle, but there nonetheless. This meant his particular coin carried a double error, not only struck on a silver planchet in error, but also showing signs of a double die, adding a new layer of rarity to an already remarkable piece. It was a revelation that sent a ripple of excitement through the grading room and later, through the auction community. Collectors began speculating about how many such examples could possibly exist. Were there others still out there, sitting unnoticed in change jars and forgotten drawers? Or had most already vanished, spent and worn down into anonymity? The mystery only heightened the allure. The more time passed, the more unlikely it seemed that another perfect specimen would appear, making each authenticated example all the more precious. Physically, the error coin carried itself differently from its clad peers. The edge lacked the familiar sandwich stripe of copper and nickel, replaced instead by the uniform glow of silver. The weight was unmistakable in the hand, just a little heavier, more substantial. Its surfaces shimmered with a softer, more radiant luster. And for those who knew how to listen, its ring was sweet and clear, the unmistakable sound of silver echoing from its edges. This unintentional blending of eras, the silver of the early 60s and the clad of the 70s, made the 1974 silver error quarter a symbol of transition and imperfection. It stood as proof that even in the most precise operations, human error and chance could conspire to create something extraordinary. Collectors who understood its significance saw it not just as a valuable object, but as a story struck in metal, a small testament to the unpredictability of history. And so, as interest grew and awareness of the error spread, the market for the 1974 silver Washington quarter error reached new heights. Bidders vied for clean examples, and every sale seemed to spark renewed curiosity. The value of these errors, depending on their condition and clarity, settled into a remarkable range. At auction, authenticated examples of the 1974 silver error quarter have fetched between $48,000 and $120,000, a staggering leap from its humble 25-cent face value, and a testament to how even the smallest oversights can create treasures beyond imagination. In 1993, the United States Mint pressed forward into another year of seemingly flawless production, keeping pace with an economy that demanded billions of coins to keep daily commerce alive. The Washington quarter, with its familiar profile of George Washington on the obverse and the stately eagle on the reverse, rolled off the presses in staggering quantities at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. The copper-nickel-clad composition had by then become standard, and with decades of refinement behind them, minting errors seemed like a relic of the past. Each quarter looked just like the next, uniform, reliable, predictable. Yet within this routine precision, something slipped through unnoticed, something small enough to evade detection but significant enough to change everything for the few who noticed. Among collectors, the 1993 quarters held little allure at first. They were, for the most part, as ordinary as any other modern issue, destined for pocket change and vending machines. Yet one dedicated collector, long in the habit of examining rolls from the bank, spotted something peculiar late one evening. It was subtle at first, no more than an odd gleam in a roll of otherwise unremarkable quarters. He pulled it closer under the light, rotating it slowly, and what he saw made his breath catch. The surface of the coin shimmered differently, almost like it was brushed in a way that none of the others were. The more he looked, the more wrong it seemed, though not in any way that he could name outright. Under magnification, the differences became clearer. The reverse eagle appeared faintly distorted, as though part of the design had slipped during striking. But the real clue lay in the rim. On a standard quarter, the raised rim is crisp and even, neatly encasing the design within. On this coin, the rim was doubled, slightly off-center, forming a shadow rim on one side while thinning to almost nothing on the other. The weight felt wrong too. On his precision scale, the reading came back lower than it should have been, a fraction of a gram lighter than standard. For a moment he considered wear, but this coin's surfaces were pristine, with almost no sign of circulation. Something deeper was at play. He flipped it over again and again, feeling his pulse quicken as he pieced it together. A rare off-center strike combined with an underweight planchet. In other words, a double error in the hours that followed. He pored over reference guides and called a fellow collector to confirm what his eyes had already told him. A planchet that had been improperly prepared, slightly too thin, slightly too light, had been fed into the press and struck slightly off its mark. The result was a coin both physically and visually wrong, yet beautiful in its imperfection. The story of the error spread quietly at first, shared among collectors in hushed conversations and online forums. Others began checking their 1993 quarters more closely, and over time, a handful of similar examples surfaced. Each one bore the telltale signs: underweight, off-center, with a doubled rim and a faintly ghosted reverse. Yet they were few and far between, rare enough to spark excitement whenever a new one appeared. Auction houses began to take notice as the first verified specimens went up for sale. Early on, the market was unsure how to value such a modern coin with such a peculiar mistake. Prices hovered in the low thousands, with bidders hesitant yet intrigued. As more examples were authenticated, however, confidence grew. Collectors who prized errors for their uniqueness began to bid more aggressively, recognizing how rare it was to find such a clean and dramatic mistake from an era of such high precision. For the original finder, the rise in value was both thrilling and a little surreal. He kept his coin carefully stored, occasionally taking it out to admire the quirks that made it unlike any other quarter he'd ever held. At shows, collectors and dealers would ask to see it, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to open amazement as they turned it over in their hands. Offers followed him wherever he went, some whispered quietly, some written on business cards slipped across tables. Yet he held on, watching the market shift as each auction set a new benchmark, the price creeping steadily upward over the years. Then came the twist. During a routine inspection at a grading service, a sharp-eyed examiner noticed something unexpected. Faint but clear doubling in the date on the obverse, almost invisible to the naked eye. It was subtle enough that most had missed it, but undeniable under magnification. This was no longer just an off-center strike or an underweight planchet. It now bore a third layer of error, a double die date. It was an almost unbelievable combination, making this particular coin even rarer than anyone had imagined. That revelation sent ripples through the collecting world. Suddenly, everyone wondered if their own 1993 errors carried the same hidden doubling. Dealers began advertising triple error 1993 quarters, and the few authenticated examples saw immediate jumps in value. What had started as a curiosity became a sensation. Physically, the coin carried the hallmarks of its unique history. The off-center strike left parts of the design distorted and faint at the edges, while the rim bulged slightly on one side and nearly disappeared on the other. The weight difference was imperceptible to the casual holder but obvious to anyone with a scale. And for those who looked closely enough, the date 1993 split ever so slightly, the numbers showing their doubled edges like a quiet secret waiting to be uncovered. This quiet mistake, hiding in plain sight for years, became an object of fascination precisely because of its complexity. In an era when quality control was thought to be near perfect, the 1993 triple error quarter stood as proof that even the most carefully controlled systems could produce something extraordinary by accident. Collectors began to see it not just as a mistake, but as a testament to the unpredictability of the minting process and the enduring appeal of imperfection. Interest in the coin grew steadily, and by the time the original collector finally decided to consign his coin to auction, the anticipation was electric. Bidders from across the country lined up for a chance to own what had become one of the most intriguing modern errors in circulation. The final hammer price stunned even seasoned dealers, setting a new record and cementing the coin's place in numismatic history. Over time, authenticated examples of the 1993 Washington quarter triple error have consistently commanded impressive sums, their value reflecting not just rarity but the remarkable story behind them. Depending on condition and clarity of the errors, these coins have been known to sell at auction for between $38,000 and $108,000, transforming an ordinary quarter into a prize beyond anyone's expectations. In 1997, the United States Mint continued its long tradition of producing the Washington quarter, a coin so familiar it passed through countless hands without a second glance. That year, millions upon millions of quarters were struck at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints, their copper-nickel-clad surfaces gleaming, their designs sharp and uniform. George Washington's resolute profile graced the obverse as it had since 1932, and the proud eagle perched on the reverse seemed just as it had for decades. Minting errors by then had become increasingly rare, thanks to modernized equipment and relentless quality control. Yet among all that mechanical perfection, one particular coin slipped through unnoticed. A mistake so subtle, so improbable, it would take years for its significance to come to light that it lay hidden at first in the swirl of ordinary change, indistinguishable to most. Even among collectors, 1997 quarters drew little interest. They were too modern, too plentiful, too mundane. But for one hobbyist who made a habit of sorting through bank rolls on quiet weekends, the difference was impossible to ignore once it caught his eye. He had almost finished yet another roll when something unusual gleamed at the edge of the stack. At first he thought it was just one coin among many that had seen a little too much circulation. But when he picked it up, he felt it instantly. The edge was different. The reeded rim was uneven, tapering on one side and thicker on the other. It was the kind of imperfection that sparked a surge of adrenaline in any serious collector that he held it up to the light, tilting it back and forth, and the oddity became clearer. On the obverse, Washington's bust appeared slightly doubled, barely perceptible unless you knew what to look for, but there nonetheless. He turned it over, and the eagle on the reverse seemed to have ghost-like shadows trailing along its wings and tail. The more he examined it, the stranger it became. Under magnification, he could see faint doubling in the date. Not dramatic, but distinct, especially in the numbers 9 and 7 of 1997. And then came the weight check. A standard 1997 quarter should weigh 5.67 grams, but his scale told another story. This one came in noticeably light. Only a few tenths of a gram below standard, but for a trained eye, that difference could mean everything. An underweight planchet combined with a double die and a slight off-center strike. It was, as he slowly realized, not just one error but a rare convergence of mistakes. He felt a rush of disbelief, almost unwilling to believe his luck. For weeks he kept it quiet, showing it only to trusted fellow collectors. Their reactions confirmed what he already suspected. This was no minor curiosity. It was an exceptional find, a type of error seldom seen, and even more rarely seen so clean and uncirculated. The story of the 1997 error quarter began to ripple through collector circles. Others began digging into their own rolls from that year, hoping lightning would strike twice. A few more examples surfaced, each one slightly different but bearing similar hallmarks. Thin planchets that had slipped through inspection. Slight doubling in the date or lettering. Off-center strikes that left the rim uneven and the eagle's wings slightly warped. None of them were exactly alike, which only added to their appeal. When the first few made their way to auction, the bids started modestly. After all, these were modern coins, and many in the numismatic world still dismissed anything minted after 1964 as too recent to be truly valuable. But as collectors who specialized in errors began to recognize the rarity of these particular pieces, the prices began to climb. A T1 show. A nearly flawless specimen drew a crowd as it was placed in a glass display case. Dealers leaned close, shaking their heads in admiration at the clean strike despite the obvious errors. Buyers hovered nearby, whispering about the doubling in the date and the remarkable condition. Over time, the value of these 1997 errors continued to inch upward. As more collectors competed to own one, the market tightened, and the scarcity became undeniable. The original finder watched the trend with growing amazement, fielding offers that grew more serious with each passing year. He turned each one down, certain the best was yet to come. Then came the unexpected twist. During an examination at a professional grading service, a sharp-eyed grader noticed something others had overlooked. On his coin, the reverse eagle showed faint traces of a misplaced lettering impression, an element from another part of the die faintly ghosted on the wing, invisible without magnification. This meant his particular coin wasn't just underweight, doubled, and off-center. It also bore a minor but extremely rare die clash error, making it perhaps the most remarkable example of the lot. The discovery electrified the collector community. Suddenly, everyone wondered what other subtle details might lie hidden in the handful of known 1997 errors. Collectors began scrutinizing their own examples with fresh intensity, hoping to find that same telltale clash. Physically, the coin remains a study in quiet imperfection. Its thinner planchet gives it a different feel, almost imperceptibly lighter in the hand. The doubling of Washington's profile and the date catch the light just so, while the eagle's wings seem to ripple with faint, ghost-like lines from the die clash. And the rim tells its own story, one edge bulging slightly while the opposite seems to fade into nothing. These subtle flaws, born from a rare failure of precision, have transformed what should have been an ordinary piece of pocket change into a sought-after treasure. The 1997 Washington quarter error, with its layered story of unnoticed mistakes and belated discovery, now commands the kind of respect once reserved only for much older rarities. By the time the original collector finally brought his coin to auction, the room was alive with anticipation. Bidders from across the country fought fiercely, their paddles rising again and again as the price climbed past even the most optimistic estimates. Today, verified examples of the 1997 Washington quarter error have sold for prices that would have seemed unimaginable when they first entered circulation. Depending on condition and the specific combination of errors, these coins have fetched between $32,000 and $103,000. An extraordinary return for what began as a quiet curiosity pulled from a roll of change.